I hope everyone here is having a great summer. And to provide a little bit of context, last month our webinar was focused on a lot of the how-tos of StoryJumper. And we had a live demonstration of exactly how you set up your StoryJumper class and how you go about creating various types of books and using the tools to make that process easier. And this video, that video was bookmarked, so you can jump to whatever section that you were looking for. And today's webinar steps back to the planning phase to help you consider what type of writing projects you might want to run in the upcoming school year. And you can go then after this webinar, you can go back to the previous webinar video and you can look at that for details on how to implement the book projects within StoryJumper. So the agenda for today is for us to talk about some success stories. We'll go through some specific book project examples, and we're fortunate to have two of our teachers on the webinar here with us who will go through some of those examples. And then we'll wrap up by talking about the Writing Projects database, where you can explore some other ideas of different types of projects that you might want to run. So if you go to the homepage of StoryJumper, what you'll find is that there are a number of success stories that have been shown there. And each success stories in general, a lot of the results that we've seen is that by running a book publishing project with your students, that results in more focused energy, higher student engagement, and the students feel a lot more confident about the writing skills by the end of the project. And in general, there's just more of an ambiance of kind of joy and celebration when you get to celebrate with the published books that everyone has created. So let me just go real quick to the StoryJumper homepage, and you can see here that underneath your classes section, there's a leading educator section. You can click on a success story, read through the success story, and then at the very bottom, if you want to see more success stories, you can click on that link as well. And you can see these success stories from a number of the teachers. And one of the teachers who's on the line with us today is Robin Forrest. And Robin is a fifth grade teacher at Helen Holler Elementary School in Sequim, Washington. So welcome, Robin. Glad to have you on the call today. And maybe you can first start off by talking about some of the challenges that you were trying to address that led you to doing your book publishing project.
Sure, thanks. Like John said, my name's Robin, and I am a fifth grade teacher in Sequim, Washington, and I've been using StoryJumper for about 10 years. When I started in Sequim, I was the gifted coordinator, and I was looking for a quality product for the kids to create through the standards that we were doing with ELA. And I came across StoryJumper, and I just was looking for something that it would be a little bit more authentic in the learning that they were already doing, to showcase their efforts and really feel what it would be like to be a published author. So that's kind of what I was seeking out and found in the StoryJumper.
Great. Now, you had an interesting sort of mantra as you were sort of beginning the project, and you had this mantra of telling your students that good writers think about the process, the content, and the final product. So maybe you can kind of go through what your process was, and also what did the students write about?
So the process really is, we start with our standards or our curriculum, right? So as a teacher, this is what I have to teach, this is what I need to do. And then the process is finding out what the kids know and what they need to know. I felt like StoryJumper really differentiated that for every single kid. I let them, in gifted ed, there's a lot of choice that you're looking for. So letting them choose the genre of what they wanted to write about, letting them choose the topics that they were interested in, and explore that even further. So starting with that, me knowing that they have to learn these standards and these and using whatever curriculum that the teachers had, but then taking it through StoryJumper. In the process part, that was the differentiation of like, well, who is good at this piece of writing, who needs more help with this part of writing. And so it just individually, I could focus on each kids and what their needs were. And then at the end, we needed a final product, and that was the published books. And it's kind of like when teachers are sending home the work that the kids are doing day to day, this was one of those keepsakes that you can really see how much growth they've made, what the quality of their work is. It's just something that parents keep. It's not something that goes in a bin or you kind of get rid of. So you really can see all of the encompassed standards in one final product.
Right, right. Now this was a personal interest book project. So really, you kept it open ended, and you wanted your kids to write about whatever they were interested in. So it could have been anything from mythology to sports to just whatever they were interested in. And do you think that helped them kind of stay focused and get them really engaged because they were writing about what they cared about?
I do. I think that was the key to the engagement. And I tell them all the time, good writers write about what they know, what they care about, what they love. And so that was really kind of the piece of keeping it so open-ended. Like you choose what you're interested in.
Right, right, right. And we'll go through an example of that, of what one of your students did here in a second. But before we do that, so they wrote books that they really cared about a topic they cared about, and then you published the books. And what was sort of the impact of publishing like a real physical book? And what was the sort of the experience that the kids had when they received those books?
Well, like I said, I've been doing it for about 10 years, and every year I'm like, I don't know if I want to take this project on again. It's a lot of work. And like I said, there's so much differentiation, and you're really meeting the needs of each individual kid, which can be very tiring, and then bringing it into that editing phase and then finishing it up. But when we open the books at the end of the year and we open those boxes, I mean, the kids are they cannot believe what they have done and what they've created. And it's just such a high quality product at the end of it that every time that we do that, I think, oh, yeah, I'm gonna have to do it again next year. Even in the office, the secretaries, when the boxes come in, they're like, oh my gosh, open them. They just want to see what the kids have done, and they're just so great.
It sounds kind of like Christmas in June.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you finish up the project with an event, right? There's like an author's tea event. How do you do that?
I've done it a variety of ways over the years. Sometimes I've used the cafeteria and invited whoever was our funding source for the project that year, invite them in and host cookies and tea or water, sometimes juices. So I'll do it that way sometimes, but I also invite the younger students in the school so that they can come in and see what they can accomplish as well. I've done it with third graders. I've done it with the project with first through, I'd say, sixth grade over the years. But in my fifth grade classroom, we'll invite the younger kids, and we've invited first graders and third graders, and they get to see what the kids have written. And for the authors, it's such a proud moment because it might be their friend that they're reading to or their younger sibling, and they really get to showcase what they've done.
Right, right. And just to be clear, so the students that you're doing this project with, initially it was gifted, but then over time you rolled this out, and you did this with students of all sort of skill levels as well.
Correct.
Right. And I think you also mentioned that for the kids where writing was a little bit more challenging for them, you also gave them some accommodations to sort of help them with their writing. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. I've had severely dyslexic students, just students with all kinds of challenges that we've used the speech to text, any of those kinds of accommodations. I've scribed for students so they can still tell their stories. There's just so many components, I think, in the StoryJumper that any kid can access in some way. And then we just modify as we go to make sure that they're all successful. And the rule really in my class is always everybody does one, no matter what your skill level is. And sometimes they do more than one, but if they're more advanced or have more time for that. But yeah.
Right. And speaking of funding, so how have you handled the funding of the publishing of the books in the past?
I've applied for grants through our
Hmm.
education foundation. They gave us a large grant last year so that all fifth grade classes, we had 6 fifth grade classes, so that 100 and I don't know, 130 something students were able to all receive a hardback book at the end. I've done it through our local retired teachers foundations. They've
Hmm.
offered grants for my classes. I think we had a Shipley Center. So some of the local organizations will offer a lot of grants for teacher projects. Churches have invested money before.
Hmm.
The PTO or PTA. I haven't done my own like fundraiser with the kids so much, but I've reached out to a lot of the organizations and they've given us grant money for them.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we can go through one of the examples of what your student created here. This was a student who was a big fan of the Norse gods. I remember this when I was in grade school.
Mhm.
I was I used to follow a lot of these as well. And she wrote about she did her research about different Norse gods here, um, and also narrated it. So I can see that she added it to her narration as well. So this was like a passion project for her, where she did a research on different gods and goddesses of Norse mythology, and then and found actually illustrations that matched it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can kind of see as we go through here. Um, some of the names may look familiar, like Loki and Thor, some other ones that are obviously, yeah,
And
for
again, you can talk
the
about the
pre-kings.
genre that they're choosing. This
Hmm.
was not part of our topics of curriculum,
Hmm.
but it encompasses all of the writing standards from beginning to end.
Right. So this was not a subject that you had
No,
specifically thought about, but this was a passion project of hers,
correct.
and she just did her research and then created the book,
Correct.
which looks fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Robin. I appreciate you
Thank you.
sharing your thoughts here. And if you have any questions for Robin, and then we'll talk with Anne here in a second. If you have any questions, feel free to go into the Q&A section, and go ahead and ask any questions. So next, we have Anne Bitter. She is a sixth and seventh grade English teacher at Kohler Middle School in Kohler, Wisconsin. So welcome, Anne. Great to have you on the call here. And
Thanks for having me.
let me actually go to your success story. Um, and what's great about, I think your by your story here and your project is that it's very well structured, and at the same time, you also have like a number of resources that you provided as well. So maybe you can talk about some of the challenges that kind of led you to this project, and then you can go through some of the project details.
All right. So I've always been, writing has always been a passion of mine. I taught 25 years of fourth and fifth grade, up until about 4 years ago, where I switched to middle school, sixth and seventh grade ELA. And because of that passion for writing, I ended up making the jump within my own district. And what I discovered when I moved up to middle school, especially when we started doing a lot less writing by hand as an elementary, where you have a finished
Mm,
product and it often does go home. You can share it with parents tangibly. Everything really has switched to digital, whether that be just the physical act of writing or writing projects in general, even book report forms, just everything is very digital. What I found is that in the digital format, whether it's Google, things get lost. It's a checkbox for kids. That's what my feeling was. They couldn't wait to get it done with. Just tell me what I need to do. I'll get it done, and then it hides in Google, forever lost. No one ever looks at it again.
Mm.
And I really didn't want that to happen with the writing that I've always done with students. So I tried to brainstorm how we could, and parents often ask at conferences and whatnot, how can I get to see my child's writing a little bit more? Well, in the digital format, you'd have to, for the most part, well, log into Google Classroom with your child. Well, that doesn't
Hmm.
often, middle school students don't really want to share a lot with their parents.
Hmm.
So um, with the writing projects that I have with my middle school students, a lot of it was narrative based or autobiographical, biographical. And so instead of doing a large book report, which we do every quarter, I decided to, instead of reading books, let's write a book. I've always wanted to write a book myself. And so I did a little research online and I came up with StoryJumper, and it looked like exactly what I wanted to accomplish, and I went for it. So I developed everything I wanted students to do in a rigid format, in a detailed way. So that's why you can see my chapter 1. It was all basically autobiographical, but also with narrative within that. So we wrote a 4-chapter book, and it took the student from where they are right now in chapter 1 about me, and I developed all of the planning guides for them so that it was a fill in, because sometimes they did have to go home and get information from a parent, because all about them also asked them about their parent, which they learned a lot about their parents. Many
Mm.
of them did not know, where was your parent born?
Hmm.
They didn't know those things. So they brought a planning guide home and they shared it with parents as needed and filled it out. And then they came back to school and they started developing their paragraphs based on my rubric, which was pretty structured. After that, then they wrote their chapter. We actually used Google Documents for our chapter writing.
Hmm.
And then chapters 2 and 3, students could think of some personal story of their own, personal narrative based. Within those 2 chapters, I incorporated most of the writing standards for 6th and 7th grade. Many of my lessons were wrapped around this entire project, such as including dialogue, how to use dialogue, how to paragraph dialogue properly. That's just one example, but dialogue was a huge standard that really got covered really well with chapters 2 and 3, especially. I felt
Mm.
like most of my 114 students mastered or nearly mastered writing dialogue, which was great. Chapter 4 then was really fun. It was projecting forward. What does my future look like in my head? How do I want my future to look like? So I structured that one as well. The planning guide is there, and then a rubric for that. So with the thinking in chapter 4 was, where am I now? Where do I envision myself, and what does my high school experience look like? What does 5 years after high school look like in my head? And then finally, where will I be when I'm 40 years old? So this was super fun. The kids just kind of ran with it. And I think in general, the students said that their favorite was chapter 4. They loved thinking about their future and
Mm.
really plan, and they really took it seriously, and it was really awesome. Some of them were really kind of, their humor came out also. Yeah, it was really great. Then after we got through all of those chapters, and we all had all of our Google Docs, I also taught students how to organize things in Google, because they had no idea. So we had a technology piece in there where we put together a folder, and then we slid all of these things into the folder. They went and some of them drew their own pictures, and then they uploaded those and they put those into the folder. And it was basically our autobiography folder, and it had any pictures they wanted to use. They had all of their chapters within it. And once we were organized, then we used StoryJumper and we copied, pasted, and we got everything into StoryJumper. And then they did a little bit of editing, a little bit of moving things around, changing some things, and created our books. And
That's great.
they're so excited about it. So our students haven't yet gotten their books. They're at school, they're in a box. My life kind of went in a whirlwind at the end of the school year. So I really wanted to get the students their books, but it didn't happen. But now they're excited for September because they know their books are there and they're going to have them in hand. We're going to do some sort of a book signing. I thought that was a great idea to invite the foundation. So Robin, thank you for that. We did have a foundation that donated a large sum of money so that all 114 students could receive an actual book. And that was an awesome idea. So I will also invite them.
That's great. That's great. So I think what was one of the things that you mentioned that was interesting is that in one project, which spanned multiple months, that you were able to address around 80% of the standards that you needed to meet for the entire year. And so you included things like the mastering dialogue as well as other standards, but you were able to kind of consolidate that all into one project, and that made just things more time efficient for you.
Absolutely. Introductions, conclusions, so many different standards that I didn't even envision that many standards to be wrapped up within this project. It was really efficient and meaningful.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Now, one of the questions that I think everyone's asking is, how do I get access to some of these project overviews and planning guides and rubrics? In the Q&A section here, you'll see that I've included a link to this success story. But if for some reason you don't find that, you can always just go to the homepage, and then you can click on the first success story that you see, and then at the very bottom, you can see more success stories, and then you can go to Anne's success story. And then from here, you can download the planning guides and rubrics and the project overview by clicking on any one of these links. And therefore, you can see all those details, download them, and then use them for your own projects. Yeah. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about the funding process? Like, how did you go about doing that?
So we have a couple of different foundations within our school district. One that is separate from our parent foundation is a Kohler School Foundation, and they fund things in a different way than the parent foundation. You have to apply for a grant for them before a certain time of year. And luckily, in the middle of this project, it was the perfect time to actually apply for that. They agreed to fund about $2,400 for all 114 students to actually receive books at the end of this project. They approved it. I went to a meeting. They asked me a few questions about it, and we were good to go. They loved it. They loved the idea. So
great. And then from a timing standpoint, it sounds like, I think you said you started this like in late November. Is that right?
I did.
And yeah, and I think even in the planning guides, you were very specific about, or in the project overview, you're very specific about like the specific deadlines of when chapter 1 was due, 2 and 3, and chapter 4. How much class time did you need to use for the students to work on their books?
We used a good amount of class time, but not all of those 3 months were completely dedicated just to the StoryJumper project. Right. Obviously, we had other things that we needed to accomplish as well during that time frame, but we did use a considerable amount of time. I did a lot of overseeing, especially once the project was underway and the students were on a roll. I did a lot of overseeing and a lot of troubleshooting, or I could see where some students were really kind of far ahead and they had a really good footing on it. I could assign students to help students, which was really great.
Mm, that's right. Yes, they're going to teach kids helping or students helping students. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. And so did you kind of check in with them? Did you review like their chapter ones when that deadline was there, just to kind of give them some feedback and some adjustments, and then give them feedback after chapters 2 and 3, and then after chapters 4? Is that how you
Correct.
check in with them?
Right. After chapter one, I checked in with all of the chapters. We also used an AI format called Magic School. I if I did it again, I think that I might approach the project a little differently and hop into StoryJumper right away.
Mhm.
Um, there's an AI component to StoryJumper, which
Mhm.
I was not aware of at that time of starting the project. So we had enlisted a little bit of AI help within, so we learned a little bit. The students didn't have a lot of experience with AI at all
Mhm.
for writing. So that was a little bit of introduction to that as well. But otherwise, I did check in with each student. I gave feedback as they were writing. For chapters 2 and 3, since they were pretty much the same standard and they had the same rubric, I really only I could, because we did some grading of individual chapters. I really only had to pick one of those. So students could actually pick the one that they felt was their strongest for me to, even though I checked in on them, especially for editing, because it was going to be a published book, I didn't feel the need to actually have to grade both of those because they were both narrative. They were both stories about themselves. So within the grading process, it wasn't necessary for me to actually dive in and actually put grades on both of those.
Okay. Okay. Maybe we can take a quick look at the book that you wrote. So this is a great this is a great idea. Like before the kids actually write the book, you actually wrote a book and you use that as a model for the students. And that's actually probably a great practice in general, so that um, a the students can see what an end product looks like. They can see how what do each chapters look like, as it serves as a good model. But number two, it also is a great opportunity for you to share something about yourself, with the kids as well.
Correct. Anytime I write with students, I always write with them or before them, and I always have
Mm.
my own examples.
Yeah, that's interesting. So this is the book that you wrote, and I think, yeah, you wrote this and then you shared this with the kids,
Mhm.
and then you can see that it follows the 4 chapter structure that that you had outlined. And the first one is the me I see, which is kind of like the background, and the kids could read this, right, and they could kind of get to know you a little bit about your background. Um, And then I think chapters 2 and 3 were some funny stories that maybe from your teenage years. Is that right?
Yes.
So chapter 2 sounds like there may have been some sneaking out of the house. Um, and then in chapter 3, Tenacious Tomboy. Okay. Yeah. And then I thought what was interesting also is that in is chapter 4, where see you when I'm 40. So you wrote it from the perspective of when you were a teenager, thinking about when you were going to be 40. Is that right?
That's correct. So I knew students were writing from themselves right now as a sixth and seventh grader. So I placed myself back into my own shoes of when I was seventh grade, and I wrote it
Mm-hmm.
in that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the kids thought they appreciated that. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I can see that. So that's interesting. So when the kids are sort of visualizing themselves, I mean, they're currently in 6th or 7th grade, and they're visualizing what they're going to be like when they're 40. There's a little bit of like self-visualization and sort of like some degree of like actualization of like, well, what do I want my life to be like? And was that did that require some guidance from your on your standpoint? Because some kids could say, well, I don't know what I'm going to be like when I'm 40. Do they need some help to sort of imagine what that would possibly be like?
they didn't have too much trouble doing that, no. But
Okay, okay.
one thing, that the way that I approached this chapter, um, I read it with students so that they could see many of the things that I projected for myself did not come to
Mm,
fruition. And I said, and that's okay, because that's how life
right.
goes.
Right.
So they really appreciated that, like, okay, this is very open-ended. Like
Right.
this is what I would like to see right now,
Right.
knowing that it's probably going to be very, very different than that.
Right. 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 Right.
There was no
Well,
wrong way to do it. I always said that there's no wrong way to do this.
yeah. 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 Well, I think for a lot of these kids, I mean, I think it'll be interesting now that they have a physical book. I think
Mm-hmm.
it'll be interesting for them, years from now, to be able to pick up that book, say when they're 30, and pick up the
Mm-hmm.
book and see what they wrote about. Like, hey, how did I imagine myself when I was at 40? How did I think about that when I was in sixth or seventh grade, and compared to like where am I now? So I think it could be an interesting comparison of, yeah, like what they thought, and then in actuality, and how
Right.
things. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. And you even tossed in a picture of yourself at 12 years old, so that's great. That's great.
They had a
All
good
right.
laugh at that one.
Wow. So I think it's an interesting practice to write before them and with them,
Mhm.
so that that they can see basically you modeling the process, and they can also just see like, hey, this is what the end product could look like, and that probably helps them, through the process as well. Yeah. 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 So if there are any other questions regarding this project, feel free to ask more questions. And again, all this is available online, through the success stories. And when you find an success story, you can then download everything here, because these are all linked. Great. Well, let's move on. Thank you so much, Anne. Appreciate you sharing your project there. Um, let me talk about the third project here. Oh, actually, Tammy's got a question here. Are there any other pricing options? So yeah, so the pricing details are online. So there are two options for physical books. There's a hardcover book and a. Let me just go there real quick. I can kind of give you the details here. So the question was, what are the different pricing options? And there's a hardcover book, and there is the paperback book. Those are physical books. And the other options here are you can download a video book. Now, a video book basically it's a video file of a 3D animation of the book with the pages actually turning. And when your students narrate their books, then their voice narration will be included as part of that video. And then the final option here is to download the PDF ebooks. And what some teachers do is they download the PDF ebooks, and then because these are high resolution uh, color PDF files, they can then print a full page from their own color printer, and then they can print that out, and they can then give them to their students as well. Yeah. So let me go ahead and let's go and talk about the third project here, which is the All About Me project. And this is a more simplified version of what Anne had talked about. It's simplified in the sense that there is a template book that is associated with this. So if you go here, there's a lesson plan here around this about the All About Me lesson plan, and there's a graphic organizer. And what this is a template book that the students can basically fill in as a way for them to um, share basically a lot about themselves. And what's nice about this is a great project to do at the very beginning of the school year, because what it allows students to do is allows them to share about themselves. And I'll go ahead and go into the template book here, some basic information about themselves, and we'll go through some of the details here in a second. So here's the All About Me template, and they would add a photo of themselves on the front cover, and then they would talk about some basic information like their name, their birthday, birthplace, a little bit about their home, and also what are some of their favorites, their favorite foods, their favorite movies, games, animals, and sports they like to play, some of their favorite subjects, some of their favorite projects that they've done at school, what they did last summer, what their favorite costume was for Halloween, what their holiday traditions are, and just an interesting fact about themselves. And then looking forward, what do they want to be when they grow up? Now, the nice thing about doing this is that once they're all done with their books, then you can share all of their books with all the other students so that all the other students can read each other's books. And that's a great way for the kids to learn about their classmates, but they can also find what they have in common. And that's a good way for kids to start developing relationships with other kids who have similar interests. So this is a very very popular project that a lot of teachers use at the beginning of the school year, just as a way to kind of ease into the school year and also to start building connections among all the students as well. Now, the next project was a project that was done by Ethel Gates. She is a K through 8 library media teacher in New Hampshire. She unfortunately was not able to make this call, but we can go through some of the details of her project. So poetry is one of the writing forms that lends itself well to group books, because typically when a student writes their poem, it's basically going to be about one page, and maybe 2 pages if you include illustrations. And so that's what she did. And she had their kids write poetry, but she wanted the content to be relevant to what they were already learning about in another class. So as a library media specialist, she then went to the science teacher at the school, found out that what they were learning about, and at the time they were learning about their school garden and what was being done in the school gardens. And then she felt like, okay, well then what if they were to write poetry books about the school garden? And so this was a garden themed group poetry book that her students wrote. And so each one of those students wrote 1 page of poetry about something about the garden, something about that they were growing, or something about they had learned about the garden. And then each student then included a photo that accompanied their poem. So you can see this is the poem from one student and their photo, and then another poem from another student, and then their photo of what they had seen in the garden as well. And I think so this was a great way to kind of compile the work from all the students. And as we talked about in the previous webinar, this could be implemented where every student writes their own 1 or 2 pages in their own book. And then the teacher can then create a compilation book that we described in the previous webinar, where the teacher can specify, okay, these are all my students' books, and I want to grab all of them, compile them into one group book, and then that would then generate the group book, which is shown here. So that's one way to implement it, where every student writes independently, but then at the very end, the teacher brings it all together in one compilation book. And then all of these books were then published, and you can see here they were published. And just like a number of the other teachers I discussed, there was a party at the end to celebrate this. So you can see some pictures here of the students who are doing some book signing. There's some cookies, and there's also some other treats. And also students were also reading their poetry to some of the younger students as well. So this is a great opportunity for your students to really shine with a physical book, and then being able to then share that with other students at the school as well. So that's the group poetry project. Let me see if there's any other questions here we want to discuss. So Monica asked a question of, do we have any examples of early elementary, first and second grades? Yeah, if we go back to the group poetry book. So Ethel is the library media specialist for K through 8 at her school. And so she ran a book publishing project for the K through 2 students, the as well as the third through fifth and then middle school students. So let me show you real quick the acrostic poetry book that her kindergarten through second grade students created. Now, the students created it on paper because of their early age. They created it on paper, but then based upon what they had created, then Ethel then created this book based upon the students' work. So this was created, the underlying content was created by kindergartners, first graders, and second graders. And these are acrostic poems. So in this case here, there was like the word spring, and then the kids then kind of wrote out various descriptions of what they felt would be relevant for spring, and then bird. So this student then basically did an acrostic poem about a bird, rainbow, and then they also provided some guidance in terms of what kind of illustration should accompany this as well. So you can see examples of this where poetry is probably a good one for young kids, because it's fairly simple and it's something that that they can express in a few words, but still kind of express themselves. And they can also bring in some illustrations as well. Now, the other thing that the students can do is they can also draw pictures. So if they were to do a poetry, do a poem like this, they could also draw pictures on hand, by hand, on a piece of paper, and then a teacher could then take a picture of that illustration and then include that as part of the poetry book. So that would be an example of this. All right. So the last thing that I wanted to touch on here was the writing projects database. So we've talked about 4 different projects today, but this is just 4 of several projects that you could potentially do. And so the projects database here is one where you can pick, your subject. So let's say you're in English, you want to do something in the for an English class, and let's say you want to do something that's informative. So there's a range of things that you could choose from here. And for each one of these projects, you can click on it and you can get more detail. So if you wanted to do, for example, informational writing, you could then choose English for informative, and then you could click here for the full lesson plan, and you could go through this and you can get the full lesson plan for that. And then you can scroll through here and look at other ideas like the All About Me project. The class yearbook project is very popular. So, a lot of times towards the end of the year, the class and the teacher want to be able to sort of summarize the year. And what they can do is create a class yearbook where every student gets 1 or 2 pages in the class yearbook to share something about themselves that they want to share to remember that year. And the teachers can also supplement with pictures that they've taken throughout the year as well. Another project, informational project that is often done is the Jigsaw Research Project. So a lot of times there's a big topic such as like states or animals or the 13 colonies or ancient civilizations. And what you can do is you can break up students into smaller groups of, say, 2 or 3 students, and they can then take that project, like a state, for example, and they can then basically divide and conquer, where one student will tackle one aspect of the state. Like they may talk about the economy of the state, and then another student may talk about the population of the state, and then maybe the third student would then address some other aspect of that state as well. Maybe the most famous people who have come from that state, and that way the students can basically jointly create a state report, but each student then focuses their time on one aspect of that state. And then the last thing I wanted to kind of point out, this is kind of a fun one here, is historical pen pals. So if you're teaching history, for example, or you want to include some level of history, then what you can do is you can assign pairs of students to work together where they are historical pen pals from the past, where each one takes on a particular role. So let's say you're teaching about the American Revolution. Well, one student could be American colonist, and then the other student could be a British soldier, and maybe they're from the same family. And so what they could do is they could basically write one group book together where they're basically pen pals and they're writing back and forth back to each other and they're talking about a particular topic. So they could be, because every aspect of history has multiple sides to it. And so the British perspective on the Tea Party, would obviously be different than the colonist perspective on that as well. So you can go through this and you can choose, and there's a lot of great ideas. The popcorn narrative also is very, very popular as well. And this is basically, this could be like a narrative story, which is jointly created by lots of students, where let's say you do a fractured fairy tale. And one student starts off the fractured fairy tale and they write page one. And then they pass it on to another student who then reads page one and then has to write page two of what happens next in the story. And then they pass it on to student number three, and then they read pages one and two. Then they add what happens next on page three, and then it goes back to student number one to continue on page four. And so that way, it's a very creative way for students to be able to write stories together. All right. So that is the projects database here, and you can go to that when you are on your class page here. You can always find that by when you're on your to-do tab here, you can click on Find Writing Projects, and then that will take you to the Writing Projects database. And you can go search through that and find whatever you're looking for. And then that'll give you some great ideas of what you can do for the upcoming school year. All right, let me see if there's any last questions. All right, well, I think that is it for today. Thank you so much for everyone for attending today's webinar. And we're going to follow up with, we'll email you a video of this webinar as well, so you can go back and rewatch certain parts if you'd like. Thank you so much. And thanks again to Anne and to Robin for joining us and sharing with us your projects. And we look forward to talking to all of you on our next webinar. Take care.